Hey there! Welcome to saas.unbound, brought to you by saas.group. I'm your host, I'm Dana, and this is the show where we chat with inspiring founders and experts to get an inside scoop on how they made their business a success. And today with me is Nimrod Priell, founder and CEO at Cord, bringing collaboration into the products your team works in. They're passionately removing friction from teamwork and making collaboration inside their organizations easier, which is super exciting. And I'm happy to see you here and learn how you're doing it.
Thanks, Anna. Great to be
Sure.
here.
All right. Well, first things first, I know you've got quite a bit of an experience, and I'd like to dig in there a little bit. So maybe we'll start with your background and just the whole inspiration behind Cord.
Sure. I started out as an engineer. That was 20 years ago. I started in an Israeli military unit and then worked at a couple of startups. Most of them didn't work out, but I got lucky. And the third startup I joined got acquired by Facebook. And I spent 5.5 years there as a PM, basically running this little subsidiary for Facebook. And we had a few million users in the Play Store and the App Store. So we had a couple mobile apps, and we had an internal service that was used by thousands of Facebook employees. That was a sort of dashboard kind of tool related to this, that was used by a lot of PMs and so on. And so both of these experiences kind of taught me like a small micro experience of B2B, because internally serving employees, and giving a dashboard tool was sort of a B2B SaaS like product. And then the kind of app store B2C mobile apps experience as well. And then I left. I started advising friends of mine who had formidable success with their companies doing B2B SaaS. Then this brought me to start Cord. So one of the themes that I've seen through these years, and today feels like very obvious, but we've lived through an explosion in SaaS tools. There used to be, a few hundred Martech tools, and then if you look today, the market maps for Martech tools, there's thousands. And I think I
Yeah.
saw a market map from 2019 with 7,290 different tools. And that's just in the Martech vertical. If you look broadly, there's like entirely new tool sets that didn't exist, like AI based content creation tools, or product managers didn't used to have a kind of tool stack of their own. And today there's like quite a few tools that are directed at product managers specifically. So there's a ton of growth in that space. And companies, as a result, use more and more SaaS. So Okta shares this chart every year of how many SaaS tools does the average SME use. And it grew from, I think, 70 tools around 2017, 2018, to like over 100 tools in the latest iterations. And if you
Wow.
look at tech companies, they over-index compared to the average general SME. So I spoke to companies like Sneak, for example, that use,
Mhm.
at least in the last count I got, over 300 tools
Oh, wow.
across the company. And so we all work in these tools, but we work in teams, right? We need help, we need feedback, we need approval for stuff we do. We sometimes need to pass on the baton, right? Like I did my
Mhm.
part, now it's your piece of the puzzle. And as you work in these tools to make these like transactions
Mhm.
that do something in our CRMs, in our CMSs, it's a new marketing landing page, a new whatever. Um, and so today, inevitably, all that communication about the help, the approval, the feedback, it goes into Slack and email, right? Um, and that means a lot of copying and pasting screenshots, and a lot of copying and pasting links, or maybe what I call the text adventure, which is like you say sort of, go to the main dashboard in Typeform, and then click this survey, and then click the results tab, and then go here and go there. And the this is not only disruptive to the person that sends the message, that has to like go into, do this like weird
Yeah.
finger stretch to take a screenshot, and then find the right channel in Slack or the right DM group and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's also really the main loss is that when you go back to the tool, there's no record of the conversation taking place. Like nobody knows. Did someone discuss this chart before? There's a massive drop in revenue in December 22. Did we discover why it happened? Is there like result? You have to like look through Slack. It's very hard to search there.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything is, you can't search a screenshot, right? So all of these issues kind of contribute to the success of tools that have embedded collaboration as soon as it's like high enough fidelity, high enough quality that people can trust it and move to using that in product commenting experience rather than relying on Slack. And you see this in like Figma or even Google Docs or a whole suite of new tools where nobody takes a screenshot of a Google Doc and says go to like page 2 paragraph 3 line 4, right? It's like all comments in line. And so this is what we kind of spotted as a pattern, and my co-founder and I, we went and kind of pitched this and vision, and we saw that a lot of SaaS vendors that we spoke to were interested in this, and so we started a company, and now we're in a few dozen tools and all kinds of verticals, from like whiteboard like tools to video editing tools to uh, dashboards and BI tools and FP&A tools and a whole host of applications that we didn't even imagine. So yeah, we're just trying to kind of, if you take Stripe for checkout, we're trying to be the kind of API and SDK of choice for the collaboration in your SaaS.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, when I first learned about what you're doing, I was like, oh my God, I would love to use that because, like you said, everything is just kind of, you know, vaporizes after like a day or two. Like you talked about it, and then you mentioned a doc, or like you sent a screenshot, and then it kind of just like disperses into the abyss, and it's just lost. And you have to, on the next call, you're like, oh, did you go through that? And you spent the same amount of time of like just going through that again. So it's a meeting that could have been, an email, or that could have been a comment somewhere. So completely understand the problem that you're solving. So you think collaborative software is what the future is going to look like for SaaS?
I think so. I think all tools will eventually be multiplayer, just as, this move to the cloud, which seems so obvious now. It wasn't, 15 years ago. It was totally new. And there was like this new set of companies that started doing things on the cloud and kind of saying, enough with the on-prem and stuff. But it wasn't clear and obvious how kind of prevalent and ubiquitous and kind of assumed uh, this experience would be. And I think it's true for a few things. It's true for the move to the cloud. It's true for PLG software.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have salespeople to support, kind of enterprise bigger deals, the fact that you can try something with just a card, and you can go quite far with just like a card, subscription to all kind of software. It's just going to be a part of everything. And the same thing, I think, will go for, in almost all cases, you want to talk to your team and be able to like leave comments and context, especially if it's linked with your other systems of communication like email and Slack.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you mentioned that you were it's an API, right? So you are, as far as I understand, you have to talk with the developers, right? Because they are going to be the one implementing the tool in the system, but they will not be the ones using it, right? So these are at least like two different sides of the coin. So you are, yeah, the developers are going to be the one working with it at first, but then the users are completely different. So who are you selling to? Like, how does it translate into your messaging and your marketing? Who's your buyer persona, and how do you differentiate this?
Yeah, so I think you're touching on an excellent point, which we kind of took to heart ourselves because um, we. I'll answer the question, but I'll start with something else that I think is
Sure.
interesting. We um, came from Facebook, and at Facebook, a really big part of the kind of ethos was dog fooding. So like
Mm-hmm.
using your own software daily. And so at Facebook, even before the Facebook Workplace product existed, that was kind of a product to let companies have an internal Facebook to talk between themselves. Facebook was using Facebook for its internal communications. So pre Slack days, um, and Slack never essentially, Facebook never used Slack, at least time I was there. I don't know what it's like now because we just used Facebook and Messenger, and that was a great way to kind of have very heavy usage internally so that we can constantly run through the product experience and kind of find
Mm-hmm.
the issues and report them and be our own kind of first biggest users. And I think it's absolutely crucial because no matter how much you encourage and ask clients for feedback, and you will never get the same kind of level of richness as just being your own user. It's not enough to just dog food because we kind of are blind to some stuff in our own
Yeah.
product and we are using it in a very particular way. But part of the realization that we had, I wouldn't say early on, it took us a while, but part of the big kind of difference we did was we essentially um, moved to using Cord very, very heavily internally. One of the ways was to actually get rid of Slack, and we rebuilt Slack in Cord um, in a way that is like it stress tests the SDK because
Mm-hmm.
like if you can build a Slack experience with all of the details and richness and kind of fine little product kind of nuances of Slack, from the notification configurations to the muting channels, the side thread sidebars, all the little details there. If you can replicate that and have an experience that is as kind of friendly to you as using Slack, then you've reached a very good point in the SDK in terms of customizability and performance and kind of the user experience that it allows. And it gives us trust because we rely on this so heavily that as soon as something breaks, we would catch it
Mm-hmm.
inside of our Slack instance. And in fact, we use the kind of staging versions like a day before it goes public, so we'll have at least a day to catch any problems that come up. And so that has been massive. It's one of the ways in which we kind of dog food our stuff. But I will say on our buyers essentially have kind of the same problem, just as you say. And
Mm-hmm.
the oftentimes in B2B SaaS, the buyer persona and the user persona aren't the same. But for us, the buyer persona and the user persona, there's two user personas. There's the developer
Mm-hmm.
they'll have to implement this into the product, and we care very strongly about the developer experience. We've just released a command line interface for this. We've spent a ton of time on our open source demos so that they're as fully baked and kind of realistic as you can get, so you can actually take the open source code as a reference implementation, start from there. A ton of time on examples and documentation and just the surface of the API and improving that experience. And our blog is filled with details that I'm not sure are interesting to all of the listeners of this podcast about moving from different CSS kind of systems and so on. Just in response to like making it easier for developers, putting templates up for Next.js and for Remix and stuff like that. And we're still investing. Like that's an area of constant investments, an important kind of pillar of our success. And we listen to developers when they grumble correctly when things are just not as they expect. But the other user is the end user, right? And
Yeah.
so we spent a lot of time. We did user research with our clients end users, right, on our clients behalf, focusing on the collaboration and commenting experience to suss out what works and what doesn't. We iterated with clients and in between clients and learned a lot of stuff about that. And we're constantly kind of monitoring that, the health of the product within clients implementations, because when it'll come to renewal, it'll all be a question of, is this feature being adopted, is it worth my continued kind of spend on this feature?
Yeah.
And when we see it's adopted, it's great. And we do have, it's not always the case, but the majority of cases, it gets massively adopted by the user base. Yeah.
Okay, that's super cool. All right. Well, and you've been around for 3 years, right? Something around
Yeah,
that.
we just over that. We actually started talking about Chord 4 years ago, so it was just before Thanksgiving 2019, and then we did a bunch of user research, and we kind of got set up, and then raised our first round in 2020, and then follow-on round. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask you about because, well, you've grown substantially over the last 3 years, and in 2020 you've raised $17.5 million,
Yeah, $17.5
right?
million, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, first of all, well, you knew it's a problem. You validated that, this idea is actually feasible for so many people. Why didn't you decide to stay bootstrap? What was the idea behind going after the VC money? Was the fast growth? Was it the fact that it's getting heated, the market for collaborative software? Or was there anything else? And how was your experience?
Yeah. So look, I have a ton of respect for bootstrapping and bootstrap founders. The honest answer, I think, is like I wasn't ready to bootstrap. I think because the start is slow, because you have to be paid by your first client in order to make any major investment. Um, you have to have a lot of patience, and I basically wanted to shortcut that because there was money that was ready to, be invested in that space, and it was a hot space, and it was a, and I think we got out of that a lot of kind of partners and advice along the way from our investors, and we were able to develop much faster and um, hire a great team, and uh, kind of still, it doesn't accelerate, I think, as much as people like to think, because the learnings and the research takes a long time that's kind of independent of whether you have the money or not. And um, there is an element where the money slows you down a little bit, because you deal with stuff that you wouldn't have dealt with when you build a 10, 20 person engineering org in an office. And there's like all these details that come into play that are just a tax, an operational tax in a way. But overall, I think this is what we need to do. I can kind of a bit older. I have a family, I have a kid. It didn't suit me to have like infinite patience for this.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, I think as long as you have kind of like the mature reasoning behind, bootstrapping or going after VC money, it's all just fine. I don't quite get the whole like bias towards founders who have raised funds. I mean, it's different, right? And like you said, thank you for saying that. Sometimes it's not just rainbows and butterflies. You have to grow fast and you have to learn fast, and it's not like you magically get an extra wire in your brain that allows you to do that faster. Everyone does it in their own timing, but it's also kind of like having two playbooks in the startup world, right? The one is, you're bootstrapping, you're going slowly, you're, after sustainable growth, you're an indie hacker, right? You have that label on you. And then another, playbook is, well, we're VC funded. So what's your take on this kind of like playbooks and just like bias of the whole like startup community?
So I have this nuanced opinion, right? And kind of some of it is maybe a bit controversial or not what people like to hear, but I think market is kind of complicated and nuanced. But what happens is when we use the same label, startup, for any company that has a website, basically, which is kind of how people behave today. I've seen people describe their offshore, um, development agencies as startups, and people describe uh, a kind of restaurant chain as a startup. Or I think we run a big risk because the advice is shared mostly very generically and broadly, and mostly in like short form on like Twitter or LinkedIn or little newsletter pieces. And what ends up happening is that there's a lot of kind of advice that doesn't apply broadly, that is taken as kind of gospel, or that generates all kinds of weird incentives. So I'll give an example. um, Fintech is a big growing industry. One of the things that a lot of fintechs do is there's some form of I don't even know the kind of official terms for this, but there's some form of lending and moving money around.
Mm-hmm.
And so their product is money. And so they often operate on very, very small margins. So, for example, they are maybe a small business lender or a kind of banking type solution or whatever. And essentially, for every $1 million that they make in revenue, um, they actually pass on most of it, because it's either debt or it's a credit line for someone else and so on. And so they would make this revenue, but then really the actual kind of profit that they make out of it is 1% or 2% or something like that. So they need a lot of cash to operate because they need to go out and market all of that. And so you see stuff like a fintech raises $100 million round. Reading in between the lines, there's like 80 million of credit in there and 20 million of actual capital for the company. Um, and but the headline is $100 million round, and that drags the kind of $100 million round attention in terms of
Yeah.
employees and expectations and investors getting excited and so on and so forth. And it's all not always commensurate. Like, I've seen some of these companies when they make 50 million in revenue a year, and they sometimes would call it ARR, and it's not even really ARR. But they can make 50 million a year, and actually, in terms of revenue to the company, that's like 500, because 1% of this. And there would be SaaS that could be bootstrapped and gets 500K and is not valued or kind of spoken about in nearly
Yeah.
like not at 100th of what they are. And I think that distorts the market. I think it distorts the market when we treat D2C brands and startups the same way as like deep tech and the same. And so not having different perspectives on the type of, for example, engineering and product that you need for these very different companies, um, the kind of return expectations, the kind of growth expectations and growth rate expectations, bunching all of them in the same benchmarks for startups, for startup success, for startup growth rates, for startups expected. Um, I think it does us more bad than good. And I wish this is something we kind of evolved in not calling everything just tech. Like the
Yeah.
rest of the industries in the world develop their own kind of names. Um, and I think we can kind of graduate to the point we don't have to say fintech and insure tech and health tech and call them all startups and treat them all as if they have to have the same kind of funding structure and round structure and speeds and equity deals and so on, but kind of treat them as separate industries, separate business models, separate expectations, separate operating models. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. All right. It's I don't think it's very controversial. I think on some level everyone kind of understands that, just taking these big labels and putting them on like literally just a huge part of business is not very sustainable. But maybe it's just it's dumbing down it a little bit for everyone else. But yeah, I get your point. All right, so I wanted to talk a little more in depth about what you're doing and how you're growing, because given the fact that you've raised 70 million, you're not really spending it all in one place, right? You chose quite a sustainable growth trajectory. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we can talk about our market in particular as an example, right?
Yeah.
So, some properties of what we do is we sell to other SaaS tools, to other software startups. We sell to developers. And so our market is the market of SaaS. You can kind of look up how many SaaS tools there are total. We talked about the thousands of MarTech tools. There's constant growth, but there's also constant churn because a lot of these are startups. They're a company product experiment that runs for 2 or 3 or 4 years and then shuts down. We unfortunately had clients of ours that had gone through, their own. They didn't reach PMF and they shut down on the kind of smaller, lower end. So overall, you can think of this kind of market of other SaaS tools that's maybe a few tens of thousands of tools. And then if you look at the ones that are kind of post Series B, they're stable, they're going to kind of stay around, and we can rely on their constant existence, like HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever, for a long time. That's an even smaller kind of market. And so to justify the scale with the plans that we have right now and what we do right now, you kind of have a company that's able to take a few thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even six-figure deals from your biggest clients. But then and so that then they have to implement it, so it takes like a while, so that like dictates a slower sales cycle. But then on the flip side of that, like we get to keep a lot of the revenue, because like R&D is the main cost, and so the quality of our R&D team and the product, and it's all digital, and there's no service being provided, or like e-commerce, or again other kind of things that are today treated as the same kind of startup. For us, it's pure technology. And so I think the kind of the thing that this guided us to is, we'll need cash to bring in a great set of engineers. Um, but it's not about, we never wanted this playbook that I think some other companies took, and sure didn't, doesn't seem prudent today, where they immediately, like, they raised a lot of money in 2020, 2021, and they like hired tens or even 100 engineers or something, and then they had to let them go when things didn't materialize or the market slowed down or stuff like that. We instead hired as if we didn't have all that money in the bank, and kind of validated checkpoints along the way. Now, I don't want to make it sound like we're genius and it was all premeditated. A lot of it was learning along the way, but we never had to kind of do a mass layoff or whatever, because what we were was always kind of slow and careful and trying to see evidence of the actual growth before we kind of created a company with no clients or not enough clients, which is the mistake that I see a lot of others do when there's a lot of money around. Fortunately,
Yeah.
I think the silver lining of this like kind of bad market that we're in now is that it does grow discipline, and I see newer companies or even existing companies kind of rein in their expectation and work in a more disciplined way. And I think that is net positive. I think it's net positive for employees that the valuations will go more in line, the companies will be safer, and the equity bets will be safer, rather than a company that raises on a valuation it can't reach and so on. And look, to some extent, we raised a ton. It was there and it was very tempting, and we're working to make that valuable. But I think we're at least doing it prudently and not by kind of over promising to ourselves.
So you took a bootstrapped approach to a VC funded, I don't want to say startup now.
Yeah, no, I see. I think it's not fair to say, we're not bootstrapped, right, in any way, but we're definitely trying to control the spend and kind of act as if we don't know if we'll raise again, because I don't
Mhm.
think it's just a matter of like spending as fast as possible. I think the situations where you can um blitz scale are kind of, they're very market dependent, and they're blitz scaling makes a lot of sense for network effects based businesses. It is way harder in B2B, where the buyer goes through a kind of committee decision, and it takes longer, and they have to um, change a workflow or rip and replace a system or integrate and embed a tool. That stuff you can spend a lot on marketing, and it doesn't guarantee sticky growth at all. And sometimes the kind of, I hope we'll see, I think the smart thing is to kind of build carefully, client by client, fix the issues so that the next client doesn't run into them, unless there's strong competition eating at your heels. Kind of trying to build it carefully. Yeah.
All right. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, one more thing that I wanted to throw in before we go into our two usual questions is team led growth. I found your awesome, I don't know how to call it, webinar interview about the topic, and I really liked it. So, could you maybe elaborate what it is and how does it play into the whole court situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you kind of think of different motions that B2B tools, B2B SaaS took. And we all know about sales led growth. That was the kind of way software is sold to this
Yeah.
day, but definitely was mostly the way software was sold up to like, I don't know, 7 years ago or so, 6 years ago, whenever is the kind of right timeline on that change, which is salespeople talking to the buyer and convincing them to go on an annual contract usually. And then product led growth, is the realization that actually for a lot of products you can just go to the end user, convince them it's useful, and then grow through them kind of adopting it for themselves. I think team led growth is how I kind of name this trend that accelerates product-led growth, or theoretically even sales-led growth, and creates retention, but it's more common in product-led growth products, which is that the end user that decided that this is right for them and started using it is also encouraged and has a very natural reason to invite more people to the product, right? And create these viral kind of network effect loops that we've seen at Facebook very, very strongly and intimately, and are now making their way, in B2B products. And the best example of this, I think, is Figma. So this is completely, stealing from their blogs and their, the discussions about that I kind of looked at deeply. And um, what happened with Figma is that there were incumbents in this space of sort of UX design. There was Sketch, there was InVision, there was Adobe X. There were like a couple of tools that were very well known and very rich in terms of features and everything. And Figma didn't win on features. What it won on, it is a great product and a better product by now, I think, for most designers, because it's kind of went ahead in terms of functionality. But originally, what it won on was that when you had InVision or Sketch, the designer, when they wanted the feedback from the developer, the PM, they'd have to send screenshots, because the developer and the PM never had Sketch or InVision installed. And so, you'd only get these, like, however many, I don't know, there's like most companies have a design index of, most tech companies have a design index of somewhere between 1 to 5 engineers and 1 to like 15 engineers. So like that's the amount of seats that you can get for this product. And then if a small company that had 1 or 2 designers, one of the designers left, and another designer joined, that designer would bring the tool they worked with them. So you could have a company switch from Sketch to InVision just because a designer that used Sketch left, and then a designer that came in was better with InVision or Adobe. So that's what he would bring in, because nobody cared, because they didn't use the software themselves.
Yeah.
But what happens with Figma then is that it's very natural, easy, more comfortable for both ends to comment inside of Figma. It's like, just go there on the browser and you can invite anyone. It's super easy and really good kind of communication about the thing that you're watching. And that makes it so, and Figma have on their blog these like network kind of visualizations where they show who are the designers and then who are the non-designers using Figma inside a company. And the non-designer population is way bigger, because it's spread out from the designer to the PMs and all the decision makers and all the developers and all of that. And then they won't rip and replace usually, because when a new designer comes in, there's, the PM and the team will just tell them, okay, learn to use Figma, because that's where we left our comments, that's where our context is, that's where the file, like, we want to keep using that system. So it helps them with retention, stuff like that. So I label that as team-led growth. I think it's like virality inside of the company as a way for seat expansion and retention, and of course engagement, which drives all of that. And so that's kind of what Cord is empowering. I think there's other ways. There's like rare other examples where you can show team-led growth without commenting, but commenting is just such a universally kind of viable path for this. If you have a spreadsheet app, you can add commenting to the spreadsheet, and guess what? There's other approvers and decision makers that need to go into the spreadsheet and leave comments. If you have a BI tool, and so on and so forth. So broadly, I think if you want to create that viral loop and create this like seed expansion, engagement, and retention in your B2B SaaS, commenting is a good way to start. You can think of your particular cases and how to kind of broaden the use case, so that you're not just targeting, I don't know, maybe you have a CI tool and it's targeting developers. Well, you can like expand the features in the use case, so it also targets DevSecOps or DevOps or something like that. And there's other equivalents to like increasing the kind of use cases that are handled, and as a result, increasing the set of team members that need to use it. But I think commenting is just a very universal way. And then your users just naturally at mention each other and bring each other into the product.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think it's really important. I mean, once somebody loves the product on the team and then bring it and you start kind of playing around with it and yeah, it spreads. If it's good, it spreads. I mean, I love the whole like lean startup thing, and you have to build an idea and you have to sell the idea first and you have to build a company, just like something that we have already discussed. But if there is no product and if the product doesn't sell itself, no matter how good a company is and how many VC rounds you've raised, it's just not going to move the needle for the customers or the users. So it wouldn't make any sense. All right. Well, two more questions, all right? The usual
Sure.
ones.
Yeah.
First one is the biggest win and the biggest failure so far for the court.
Oof. Wow, that's hard. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's so many ups and lows on the way. Some that come to mind. I wouldn't kind of say they're the biggest ones necessarily. Um, I think we built. That's very, it's very trite, and everyone says that. But I think we did build like an amazing team. Um, that's just like unique, and it has this property. I didn't realize how to call it until I saw a fairly recent blog post with someone else describing this, where the team is composed of extremely smart people that are extremely driven but are also extremely humble. And I think that is critical because um, you can find smart and driven people that are a nightmare to work with, and there's plenty of these around. And but once you find a set that's know what they're doing and care about the details and are driven to succeed, but are also actually kind and humble and kind of try to get along, then they act as this like natural filter. So I think we built a very resilient team in that regard, and I'm really proud of what we built. Some of the biggest wins have to do with like reaching like milestones in the usage of the product that we have a client where more than 70% of their end users are 70% of their weekly actives are commenting every week, and then even more are like reacting to comments, resolving comments, reading comments, etc., etc. And it's just great to see that you've built a feature that for a few $1,000s, this client now has a feature that is like one of the most used features in their product, like a video editing product. It's a great fit and just works well. So a lot of that were big wins, the kind of exciting deals that we had. On biggest failures, man, there's a lot of that as well. Most of them, I think, for me, fall down to bad product decisions that I made. Um, Stuff that I believed in, and I couldn't see that it was wrong, and it took a while to realize it was wrong, and then it took a while to fix it. For me, it's the product stuff that I care about. Like an example would be we, for the longest time, kind of sold and believed in and tried to like push this vision of a sidebar for collaboration where you
Mhm.
essentially can integrate it very easily because it just takes up the right hand side of the screen, and all the comments would live there and the user could access their inbox there, and so on and so forth. And the thing is that it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit a lot of products, because what you really want is the commenting to live in context on the elements that it's talking about, rather than on the side, where
Mhm.
it's both kind of out of the way. You have to draw these arrows in order to point at the thing that you kind of want. It means that it's harder for users to create a comment. Like there's a set of products for which the sidebar fits, but um, a lot of them you get more by actually breaking it down to pieces and components and saying, okay, I can. And that was it cost us a while to go with that solution and to kind of take the time to realize that we need to change it, and we took a big rewrite to do that, and that was on me. There's a couple of other things that are more technical, have to do with the SDK, and I think my co-founder, who is more kind of involved with the SDK and API surface, kind of bears these as his own things that he feels he didn't direct the team quickly enough to the right solution. And we're still learning, right? Like a lot of it is learning, but these definitely feel like the lowest moments.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's your, and I don't really like to say it's your baby, right? Because it's not your baby, but it's something that you so deeply care about, right? And you're like, oh, but it didn't work. So you take it personally, no matter what, no matter how much people say, oh, you shouldn't, because it's just a product. But yeah, I completely understand. And well, the last question is about a hack, right? So can be anything, can be about, building an amazing team, can be about sustainable growth, um, something that might sound unconventional for many people, but works for you.
Um, a few things we ditched along the way. I think there is then it's a personal learning for me. And so it's kind of maybe an anti-hack. I think there's a culture that I see that I was kind of also taking a lot of guidance from. That's a culture of making up a lot of processes for everything. You see it in a lot of newsletters and LinkedIn posts and whatever. Um, People have these recipes for how to, do product planning, or kind of, oh, you have to write this doc and that doc, and we have this style of one pager with, and I think you can get very, very, it's very addictive. There's something very easy to get kind of excited about, especially if you're like a kind of a productivity freak like me. And some of the stuff that I learned over time is to actually shed all of these constructs that are, a lot of them are coming from way, way bigger companies than your average startup, and are mainly useful and needed, if at all, at a 500-person company, not at a 10-person company. But they're being adopted in a 10-person company. And I think what you kind of really want in a 10-person company is actually something that doesn't rely on these crutches, and is just like very open discussions, and just gunning for it, and kind of sharing what works and what doesn't. And I think the hack is like, actually feel very welcome to forget and ignore all of this advice. There is not one process or document or founder, associate, or chief of staff, or like a lot of these trends of like, oh, this is how Spotify built their teams, this is how Amazon does their one pagers. None of that, I think, will make the difference between failure and success. Yeah, I don't know. That's my hack was stopping personally to put a lot of stock and kind of a lot of care and interest into all of these. I don't know another word for that, in the processes and documents,
Yeah.
and kind of just going with like, oh, we'll just work on the project without defining it or having sprints or whatever. We'll just work on it until it's ready.
Hmm.
And if something else comes up that's more important, we're gonna stop working on it, working on the other thing. And we don't need, big process documents or commitments to ourselves or roadmaps. What we need is to be in the room and talk about it, and kind of share the vision and understand, work out what's important, what's not.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know, a couple of years ago, just the biggest anxiety in my life, because everywhere you would look, there would be a blog post or video about like automate this and automate that. And if you're, if you're a marketer, you have to, have your blog posts and your social media posts be in the buffer for like months and months to just, go out there to focus on this strategy and then the bigger picture. And I was like, I don't even have buffer in the first place. Like I just, I just go with the flow. There is a piece of news that I want to reflect on, and there is a conversation that I want to discuss on social media. Um, so it was just constantly like trying to adopt all these like automation tools and be better, be faster. But then yeah, I came to realize that it's not a this is not a success if you have tenth of thousands of posts scheduled in your scheduling tool. They might all be super mediocre and not do anything. So it's really really not about that. It is about work, and it is about reflecting on what's actual and what's there. So yeah, I think that's a great hack. We all need to chill sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nimrod. I mean, that was I really, really like that hack, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I think what you were doing with Cord is pretty great. I mean, I got really excited about the product and what it could do to teams. So yeah, would be happy to follow up next year, see where you're at, what you're building. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It was great chatting.
Sure, same here, and take care.